Hey, everybody. Welcome. Welcome.
Yo.
We're going to talk Saw traps today.
This fucking franchise.
You're welcome.
Jesus. I have such a love-hate relationship with these movies, but watching them again this time for the purpose of the show, and I hadn't seen all of them. There were a couple, I hadn't seen the latest one, which I actually liked.
Yeah, I hadn't seen it either.
And then I hadn't seen 3D, which was 7.
Right.
I think Saw 7. Looking at it more from like a psychological perspective, I had been reading about how Lee Whannell and James Wan and those guys were actually insulted that people refer to these films as like torture porn and gore and all that. They're like, really, a lot of the gore is implied, which I thought was an interesting.
Not really, James
I'm
and
like,
Lee.
guys, it's like about as
No, there's a lot of gore.
Yeah, like they talk about it more.
I mean, if they're talking about the first movie, okay.
Yeah.
But there's 8 other movies.
Yeah, and maybe they were, but I will say that it was interesting to watch more of the psychology around moral culpability and how the victims that he chose and I know this has always been like, there's nothing profound about what I'm saying, but watching as the franchise progresses and what he does and how he builds and how he puts certain people in place, for the most part, it's whether you like this type of horror or not, and I'm on the fence about it, I appreciate just all of the depth to this.
Yeah, I
franchise.
do as well. I would say that now, having watched all of them, and with Saw 10 coming out very soon, which is one of the reasons why we wanted to do this, and I had never watched the whole Saw franchise, and it was something I kind of avoided because the first movie and the second movie were so effective that it scared the F out of me. Like, it was that first movie is just a really good movie. And then they followed it up with 2 more movies that I thought were really solid. So that first trilogy to me is up there in the horror world with some of the best unique at the time, like original ideas that I thought were really excellent. From there, it falls apart in my opinion, but because they're much more psychological. Especially the first one, of course, and I think the second one as well. And then the third one, you get into where the spoiler is, and honestly, anybody who wants to watch the Saw franchise has already watched it already, and they're like hooked on it. But if you guys want to just learn about the Saw franchise, one of the things is like that in 3, the traps get way more sophisticated. Like there's a huge jump in kind of the way they do the traps, and they get way more impossible and way more sophisticated. And then the spoiler is that you realize it's not actually Jigsaw doing the traps, and there's this whole like reveal and so it's very different. And so it makes sense. You're like, why are the traps so different? Why are they not given an actual choice on a lot of them? Because the brilliance of the first 2 is that you're given this choice and you can survive it if you take the very difficult, challenging road of whatever part you're supposed to cut off or poke you or, practically bleed to death to try to survive. And by 3, the traps just become, there isn't a choice anymore. There isn't that moral dilemma. And then from then on, it's like some of the traps have a moral dilemma
And some don't.
Some of them don't. And so I just attribute to that, like, did they give themselves permission to do it that way? Because Jigsaw wasn't, doing all the traps like he did in the first couple.
Yeah.
So I didn't like him as much, and that's okay.
There were a couple in the middle where it died down, and then I allowed myself to let go of how, it was no longer directly tied to one, and some of them as standalone movies I enjoyed. Like, I actually really liked Saw 9. I thought Chris Rock did a great job.
Spiral.
Yeah.
I thought that was a solid movie. I also liked Jigsaw.
Yeah.
The 3D is the worst for me. That's like, oh my God, the worst movie ever. Good
That's
Lord.
where a lot the movie was terrible, but god damn, some of those traps in there.
Yeah. Oh, I know. So that's what we're here to talk about today for the most part. So that's a little bit about the movies, and we'll probably, I could do a little ranking at the very end of like what how my ranking would go. But let's talk traps. I don't know about you, Kathy, but I'm not doing my traps in any particular order.
No, I'm not either. I'll probably just go in order of the movies.
Okay, sounds good. Like, let me do that.
Start with one.
Yeah, we'll start with one. Do you have any in
I
one?
actually don't have, since we did top 10, I don't have any from number one.
Okay, great. Well, then I will start. On my list of the top 10 traps that psychologically get me, like that's kind of what these are, right? You have a different list than me because we're going to respond to things differently. So the first one I'll mention is the reverse bear trap.
Okay.
Now, the first time it has seen is in Saw 1, but it's in like 2 or the other movies. It's one of the ones they've used, more than once.
I do have it listed later.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's in a different movie. Mm-hmm. The thing about this trap is that it's a mechanical contraption that's attached to the victim's head and it's secured with a padlock. There's a timer that's attached to the back of it. And usually the victim has like 60 seconds to find the key basically to unlock the trap that's around their face, which is that's very bad to me. Anything around the face, right? And you're going to want to find the key to remove it. And so then there's something you got to do. So it's Shawnee in this one. That's one of the reasons why I liked it so much. So if the victim fails to do the trap, it'll burst open, basically ripping their jaws apart, as like the frontal part of the trap is hooked into their upper and lower jaw. So if they don't find the key, it will literally just go off like a trap, like a rat trap, and rip their jaws apart.
Jesus Christ! No, it's used throughout the franchise, and it is gnarly.
Yeah, 3 times that I know of so far, but maybe there was more. Do you want to mention your reverse? No, we're gonna go in order. Okay.
Yeah, and actually, I'm looking at it now, and I'm not sure if it is on here. I think I had thought about putting it on here.
Yeah, there's some ones that I thought about putting on too. So I'll go again because I have another one.
Yeah, go for it.
In Saw 1. I believe that the quintessential sort of I can't mention Saw without it is the bathroom trap. It's basically the whole premise, the whole thing around Carrie Elway's in the very first movie is my absolute favorite trial. They call them trials, but in the beginning they called them traps. And so the idea around that is so amazing. Everything, all of the reveals within the Saw movie, that eventually the massive reveal of who's lying on the floor in the room with them the whole time. That whole bathroom trap, the sawing off of his leg, the way they come together and they actually are connected in some way. And when you've watched all 9, that kind of reveal becomes like they don't try to do it anymore because, well, they sort of do, but it never really works as well. It's just the best one. So yeah, I have to say, like, the bathroom trap of the very first movie is probably my favorite trap of the whole thing.
Okay.
But we're also talking about sort of like the most gruesome traps and the ones that got us psychologically. And certainly the very first time I watched Saw, the whole thing with the bathroom was like amazing to me. That reveal, I did not see it coming. It was great. So,
and I think you bring up a good point, because some of them are more gruesome than others, but some of them that are less gruesome are more psychologically terrifying.
Absolutely.
So I have a
little bit of a mix.
Bit of a mix too. I want to see where I put this one, but I want to talk about Saw 2, and it's the needle pit.
Yes, that's my one from Saw 2 as well.
Jesus Christ. Okay, so this is where Shawnee's character is thrown into the needle pit. I have such a gross fear of dirty syringes. So she falls into this pit that's filled with thousands of dirty used syringes. So she has to dig through these syringes to find a key to stop the torture, essentially. Although in order to find the key, like in all of these traps, they have to do harm to themselves. And you see as she's doing it, and as close as they'll get close up to the needles, you can see that they're dirty and there's shit already in them. And they're like poking her. And she's a recovering addict in the movie, so there's so much there, right? But she has to literally just paw her way through this, and buried somewhere at the bottom of this pit of syringes is a single key. As time is running out, she's desperately like pawing her way through more and more and more and more and more. And that, like, you can just feel, because we've all had, I mean, most of us anyway, have had blood drawn or we've had our finger pricked or something. Just imagine those being dirty and just being like torn into your body in order to escape death.
And it's literally like your trauma trigger. It's really literally like what you're jonesing for.
Absolutely.
Which is,
and could be killing you at the same time.
Right. And the other thing I thought was psychologically really difficult for me with this one, and besides her performance, which I think in the first couple of movies, she's just so great in this, and that's kind of why like 2 of her traps are my favorites, is the thing about this is there's this nerve gas situation where somebody's got to go in the pit and get the antidote, which is in one of the syringes for somebody for whatever reason, whatever. So they're like under a lot of pressure. There's this antidote for like this deadly nerve agent that they're all breathing in. And there's still several of them alive. And so they're trying to decide who's going to go into the pit. And nobody wants to go, of course. Everybody's trying to avoid it. And one of the guys literally shoves her in. So she doesn't even choose to go in. So that's scary to me.
And he was such a fucking coward.
He just throws her in there. So then she's in there. And, you know, she does end up finding the thing with the thing that she needed, whatever it was. And I don't know. It's just very frightening. It's very frightening.
Yeah.
Right. Do you have any in Saw 3?
I don't have any in 3 or 4.
Okay, so I have several in 3, so I will just try to get through this. So the freezer room. This trap was the first in like a series of tests that's happening. So in the Saw movies, they have like somebody's trial. Like in this one, it's like Jeff Denton's test. Oh, they call it a test in this one. It's a test or it's a trial. They try to call it something. And then that means there's a series of traps. And so this trap is the first one in a series. And it's a room located like in an abandoned plant or building or whatever. And there's this like freezer room, right? And the guy who's going through this, it finds this woman in there. There's this victim in this like stripped down entirely and chained with her arms to the ceiling in the middle of the room. Mm-hmm. And she's getting sprayed. Oh, she's like in between these 2 metal poles or something. And she's in this freezing room. And there's these like 5 or 6 nozzles that are spraying her with water. Every time she gets sprayed with water, icy water, and it's at periodic intervals, so like, you know, it's coming. She knows it's coming, and of course ultimately you'd freeze to death. And by the time this guy discovers her in there, you know, he's given a test to try to get a key out of a thing to get her out of there, to get her off of the thing and to try to save her. But there are the key is hung from a wire like behind multiple like cooling pipes that are behind the back wall. Mm-hmm. And so he's supposed to burn himself, hurt himself, obviously. This is the way they always go. Well, at least the good ones, to get to the key. And so he just deliberates for like a fuck ton of time. Half the time in these early movies, I'm like, you're deliberating too long. Make a decision. Oh, but of course, all of us would make a terrible decision. So anyway, you know, every time it sprays her, she screams bloody murder, and it's so freezing and all of that. And then she ultimately freezes to death. And then there's the rack was in this one too.
Okay.
That was one of my ones. I mean, you can imagine this was also a part of the series of tests, and it's just this like big, large trap, and it resembles kind of like a metal crucifix. And there's this little pedestal that the person is standing on. And there's, you know, if you imagine a crucifix, his arms are out, his legs are down, his head is in some kind of a trap. And they're all in these like cylindrical contraptions, like around all of his limbs. And then as the time period goes by, because it's always timed, everything is twisting.
Oh, I remember this one.
His arms are twisting, his legs are twisting, and then ultimately his head is twisting. So what ends up happening is it goes in succession. First, the right arm twists and breaks, then the left arm twists and breaks, then the right leg, then the left leg, and then finally the head, because if you twist the head enough, then you're going to die. So he breaks all four limbs, and so that one scares me. So my last two from 3 would be the angel trap, which is the one where she's up and she's got something in all of her ribs. And then what ends up happening is she has to put her hand in acid to get like a key out.
Oh, I remember that one.
Yeah, she has to get a key out, and when she doesn't end up doing that, the angel trap fillets her basically from the ribs and
that
pulls
was gnarly.
her ribs back. Yeah. And I thought
that was the detective, right?
Yeah, that was like a saw trap, right? You have this dilemma. It's like you either maim yourself or you die.
Well, and I think they show it also at the beginning of 4. Like you get to see her again and how her body. They do a really good job on the effects of that too.
They totally did.
It's really grotesque.
Just the way it's shot, like the shots and the way they get her, and the stress of her trying to. And she does. Most of them do end up putting their hand into something, or they try and they get maimed and it hurts so bad they just don't do it fast enough.
Yeah.
And then the last one from 3, I liked a lot of the traps in 3, obviously, or at least they really scared me, is the pig vat.
That one's disgusting.
Yeah. This very bad guy is like basically laying in a pig vat, a vat of pig intestines and things. And these dead pigs are being hauled in like on a conveyor belt and dropped into an incinerator of some kind. And then the pig guts and juice are shooting out onto this guy who's in the vat, and basically if enough of that happens, he's going to die. He's going to be smothered to death by the pig guts. And so the guy has a trial to get him out of there, get the key, blah blah blah. And that one was very scary and gross to me, more gross than anything else, and so it made my list.
Yeah, that one was fucking disgusting.
Yeah. All right, let's do 4. You do 4.
Okay, yeah. Number 4, we have the knife chair. This was really disturbing. It was like some Edward Scissorhands bullshit.
Yeah, that scared me.
It's terrifying.
Again, with the face.
Well, yeah, you think if you're sitting in this position, I'll describe it in a moment, how terrifying this must be. So Saw 4 knife chair is the first trap a Jigsaw actually ever made. And the person is sitting in the chair with a device holding 8 knives in front of their face. Their arms and leg restraints will open if they push their face far enough into the fucking blades.
Yeah, it's really horrible.
It's like pick your poison. So you have to push with your face hard enough through these things to get the rest of your body out. Right. Otherwise, you're just going to be stuck in this chair.
Yep.
So damn well in a place of survival, you're going to try it.
I mean, you're going to try and it's going to hurt like hell. And then you're going to realize, oh, it's not simple. I literally have to cut half my face off to get out of this, but I will survive if I don't bleed to death.
This is one of the goriest ones just because there's so much blood.
Yeah, there's so much blood. And what I thought was interesting about it too is that he does do it.
He does.
He does get out. And then the gore that's on his face, like half his face is like
his
hanging
skin's
off.
just hanging off.
Because that's to me what Saw traps are supposed to be. They are supposed to be the moral dilemma between being maimed and almost dying and dying for sure.
Right.
And then some of the traps are other people's pain and your pain. Will you sacrifice yourself?
I'm going to talk about one of those.
To save someone else. So yeah. There's that.
Gross.
Yeah, that one was on my list too.
That's the only one from 4 I have.
I skipped to 6 at this point. Do you have any in 5?
I have one in 5.
Great.
And it's actually the opening scene. And it's the pendulum trap.
They do that's a good one. They do tend to have these really amazing ones as the first one.
Yeah, the opening scene in this one got me the most. And it's actually, I guess it was influenced by Edgar Allan Poe.
Yeah, obviously the pit and the pendulum.
Ugh. Okay, so and you find out later who this guy is, but the victim's arms and feet are strapped to a metal table, so he's like lying on his back. There's shackles attached to short metal chains, so he can like move his wrists a little bit. And then additionally, there's an automatic metal shackle put around his neck, so he can't move. Right, he can't really fidget much. So above him. And I want you all to just picture this if you haven't seen this movie. Above him at the ceiling is a large contraption which held a large blade in the shape of a pendulum. Once the game starts, this fucking pendulum starts to swing back and forth and begins to be lowered down in regular intervals. So after 30 seconds,
slice.
he has 30 seconds to figure this out, or it's going to start to cut into his body. And after 60 seconds, it's going to kill you horizontally. It's going to cut you in half.
You have to act fast, man.
There's these two vices with small pressure buttons behind them. And to stop the pendulum, he has to insert both of his hands into the vices and activate them by pressing the buttons. But he's like cutting the shit out of his wrists while he's trying to do that. So it's slowly crushing his hands. So again, it's like, are you going to go through that pain? And even if you are, can you do it fast enough?
Yeah, most of us would pass out with any of these pains.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm surprised they haven't done that yet where, I mean, I realize it's not very cinematic, but a lot of us would pass out from the pain before we would be able to, like you may choose to do it, but we would pass out from the pain before we were successful.
Oh my gosh. I can't, that one terrified me just because of the vantage point. Like you're lying there and watching this coming out of the ceiling.
Yeah, the shots were really great.
Yeah.
And I see the obvious inspiration. It's pretty great. I skipped to Saw 6 at this point, and the pound of flesh, which again, an opening trap. I think they really do try to hook you with those opening traps being killer. But the pound of flesh is there's these two people, and they're both in a cage, and they're given instructions to cut off 5 pounds of their flesh and drop it through like a hole, and whoever gets to 5 pounds first lives. And so that's brutal. One of the people is a heavier set guy, and he goes for like chopping off some of his belly. And so you're watching him sawing through his belly, very gory. I don't know what they were talking about with no gore. That's ridiculous. This whole franchise is full of gore.
Yeah.
If you like gore, like this is a good franchise for you. And then the girl is smart enough to literally just chop off her arm, like from the elbow. And that gets her to 5 pounds quicker, and she survives.
Oh, that's right. And then they show her later. She's like, I know I'm not okay. I don't have a fucking arm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that scene where she's cutting her arm off too is just like the desperation.
That one just felt really brutal.
Yeah.
And it felt very much like a saw trap to me, like a scary saw trap, because they're literally in competition. Who's gonna inflict the most amount of pain, and also who's gonna guess what's about 5 pounds and get there quicker? Because obviously, if you cut off more right out of the gate, you're gonna get there quicker. He goes for the belly, something that he feels like he's more able to do, and doesn't get to the 5 pounds. It's just brutal.
God, that scene is horrible. That is a good one.
Because he cuts off his stomach faster than she cuts off her arm, but he doesn't get to the 5 pounds.
So he's got to keep going. Oh God, you just cut all that out.
It's brutal.
Okay. Which are we on 5 or 6? I forgot.
That was from 6.
Okay, so I have one from 6 also.
Go for it.
It's the so we were talking about one that might influence another, and it was the oxygen crusher.
Yeah.
So this one is more so like, you know, anybody who has a fear of drowning or a fear of like their windpipe closing or just that like that slow death.
Awful.
Right. So this one is the first one in a series of tests, but the victims are trapped in 2 large identical contraptions, and they consist of 2 big metal clamps aiming at the victims' bodies from the sides. And then the test subjects are kept in their position by chains around their arms and a leather restraint around their stomach. They wake up and they have these breathing masks on their face. And once the game begins, there's this really, really sensitive pump that's measuring literally every moment of their breathing activity. So each time one of them takes a breath, the clamps would close in on their chest and they would eventually, crush their body. So the only way for one of them to survive is the death of the other one. And once the game is over, the clamps around the winner's body move back and the chains drop. So this one is total control under panic. And the opposite of what in some ways you have to do in the other traps, which is you have to panic, you have to cut your arm off, you have to be erratic.
Fast.
This one's like, don't breathe. Don't breathe. Because if you breathe, you're going to suck up that, you're going to die.
It's like that one where she can't scream. The noise triggers the things to go towards her neck. And there's pain and she can't scream. That's like this one where...
This one freaks me out. Because what do we do when we're panicking? We shallow breathe.
Yeah, of course.
Fuck!
If you don't have a meditation practice, you're fucked with that one. Because there's no way you're going to be able to center your breathing and calm yourself down. It's very scary. And then I just have one more for traps that are, because we both did, obviously, if you hadn't realized yet, we both did basically like our top 10 like psychological traps that scared the shit out of us in the Saw movie. My last one is the shotgun carousel in 7, which is also called which is basically called Saw 3D, or the worst one of the bunch. That's what I call it anyway. But even though it was the worst movie of the franchise in my opinion, this trap is pretty killer. It's basically the fourth one in a series of tests. They're going, this one guy is going through all these tests, and it's located in this large like animal enclosure inside of an abandoned zoological institute. And there's 6 people chained around like a carousel, like a kid's carousel. And once the game begins, the carousel like occasionally stops. Duck, duck, goose. If you played that when you were a kid, it just occasionally stops randomly, causing one of the victims to sit literally directly in front of the barrel of a mounted shotgun. And to survive the test subjects have to rely on the help of the 7th person, which is the guy outside of the carousel who's actually going through all these trials and being put into these moral dilemmas. And so standing on the pedestal outside of the enclosure is this guy, right? And there's 2 buttons. And every time the carousel came to a standstill, the guy had to press both buttons simultaneously in order to save the victim, the specific victim that's in front of the shotgun. But then the victim's hand will be pierced by a metal spike, meaning the 7th guy, the guy outside the trial, he gets spiked by a metal spike if he decides to save. So that's one of those ones that we were talking about, like where you have to endure pain to save other people. And will you do that? Will you save them? And in return, the shotgun would go into an upright position and shoot above the person's head without harming them. But of course, scaring the shit out of everyone because it's loud and everything. And you don't know they don't know like what's going to happen. And only 2 people can be saved. So 4 had to die. He literally had to pick 2 out of 6 to save.
Oh my God.
I mean, it was crazy. And also just fascinating, because they're all like begging and screaming.
I remember that one too.
Yeah. So that's my last one.
Okay. So Saw 7, which is the 3D one.
The one that I was just talking about. Yep.
Yeah. I know you weren't a huge fan of this one, and I wasn't either, but I found most of my traps in this one.
Great. Yeah, it doesn't have to be a good movie to have good traps.
I felt like they kind of made up for a bad movie by some really grotesque shit.
Fair.
The first one is the opening scene, which is called the Lover's Triangle. This one was also another one that freaked me out because it was on public display. And you think about nowadays, people do things for a lot of effect. And not to digress too much, but a few years ago, I was going into Ralph's, which is like, if you're on the East Coast, that's Kroger, it's a grocery store. there was a guy who was on the phone and he was FaceTiming. And then all of a sudden he started to do something really goofy. And I thought he was like messing around. And then I thought he was faking a seizure, but he actually was having a seizure.
Yeah, I think you've told that story on the show. Yeah,
and it was really freaky because nowadays sometimes people do things for
views.
For views. And so I would imagine people watching this opening scene were like, is this even real? And there's
absolutely.
So imagine like window shopping and walking by, and there are two guys and a woman who's hanging from the ceiling. And in the trap, a woman named Dina is chained to the ceiling while two men, Brad and Ryan, are chained to opposite walls. The three of them are in a triangular formation with each person's chains being just out of reach of the other two. So the objective of the trap is for one of the men to kill the other before time runs out, or all else the three will be killed. So as this is happening, they're basically fighting like, well, which one of us do you love more? And they're having this whole like lovers triangle literally happening. And as they're fighting, the table saws start to move towards the guy, and then both of the guys, and then there's another one on the ceiling that's going towards her. And you watch this whole thing unveil, and then it's just like blood and guts dripping everywhere. And it's really disgusting, but also terrifying, mostly because it's on display. And imagine like that's your death. You've got hundreds of people sitting around like voyeurs, and they can't get out of this situation. That one freaked me out.
How many more do you have?
I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Should we do some Saw facts?
Yeah, let's do some Saw facts.
All right. Well, let's do a little
Saw facts with Drew.
Oh, God.
Oh, number 1.
I can only imagine. Mm-hmm.
How long did it take to film the first Saw?
Oh, okay.
Number 2, true or false, the first Saw was written with the first 3 movies in mind.
Okay. True or false? Okay.
Number 3, how many syringes were used in the needle trap? That's part 1.
Mm-hmm.
Part 2 of that question is, what type of tips were replaced the needle point? Like, what did they use for?
What did they put on it so
Yeah.
they didn't die?
Mhm.
Got it.
Number 4, what was written on the wall at the crime scene near Detective Allison Carey's body? And I'm going to give you 3 options.
Okay.
1, or A, I should say, her life is in your hands. B, cherish your life. Or C, judge as I judge.
Got it.
And then number 5, during the release of Saw 4, Lionsgate partnered with this organization to offer free movie tickets to fans who donated what?
All right. Thank you very much. Okay. Continue on
You're
with your
welcome.
traps.
The second one in Saw 7 is the horsepower trap.
Yeah, that was awful.
I had to look away.
Yeah. Oh, there you go.
The horsepower trap it's located in this garage at an auto body, like a junkyard. And the door, it's a 1976 Chevrolet El Camino, and it's held up by several jacks. It's up off the ground. The doors as well as the hood have been removed, and the steering wheel is secured in this position that's actually held by chains. And so the primary victim is sitting in the driver's seat of this trap, sits on the driver's seat with their naked back glued to the seat. Once the game starts, this dude has 30 seconds to tear himself away from the seat and pull a red lever attached to the motor.
That one's so brutal.
So during the whole game, the car starts to speed up. And if the subject doesn't manage to pull the lever in time, the jacks holding up the car are going to fall anyway, resulting in a deadly chain of events. So on top of that, you have a second victim who's strapped to a large metal plate by the barbed wire. The person's head lies directly underneath the right rear tire of the car and would be crushed if this guy does not pull his back away from the seat.
Yeah, it's like if he doesn't succeed, 3 other people die.
And the third person is chained to a metal post behind the car, and the victim's arms and lower jaw are pierced by metal rings.
Amazing.
So if he does not rip his back off, it's going to rip off the arms and jaw of this third person. And then I think there's a fourth person on there as well, where the garage door will fall directly.
Oh yeah. I wasn't counting the guy in the car. I guess 4 people.
and be overrun once it starts to. I mean, this one was really disgusting. You watch his entire back skin.
Yeah, and I guess the thing for me with this movie, of course, is just like a time period when it was made. It's like 2010, so think about 2010 and the kind of movies that we were making, and it was kind of the teenage thing, and the effects were kind of a little bit cheesy, so I wasn't as scared, I guess. I don't know, but that was really gruesome.
I think what it is in Saw 7, like you said, is that they're just really, really gruesome. They're not as well in
they're not psychological.
They're not as psychological. That's right.
But there is a lot of gore, and so it sounds like you're and this is what's interesting about this, you guys, is when you pick your scariest traps, is like, are your scariest traps more like gory and awful and gruesome, or you have to look away, or a lot of yours more psychological, or whatever it is? I think that's interesting.
The other one in Saw 7 is, I think it's called like the silence test.
Okay.
And this is there are a lot of duos.
I mentioned this one earlier.
Did you?
No, I just mentioned it.
Oh, okay.
I mentioned it with something else where she can't scream.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a good one.
The victim is sitting in the chair in the middle of a metal contraption, and I think it's her boss or colleague or whatever, is trying to help her. So to prevent her from moving away, the person wore a straight jacket. So she has a straight jacket on, and her head's being held in place. So the machine surrounding the victim consists of a metal ring held up by 4 metal posts at approximately the same height as the victim's head. Once this game begins, she has 60 seconds. The second person has 60 seconds to obtain a key, which will deactivate the machine.
Damn keys, I tell you.
But she cannot scream. And there is a fish hook hanging from a wire, and there's a key, I think, all the way in the person's stomach. So they're trying to take this key out, and she's not allowed to make any noise, or this contraption's going to kill her. So he has to do it little by little, which it's like ripping at her, and then he has to cover her mouth. Another one that I was like, this is awful. Fucking awful.
Yeah, it's that one almost made my list. It's akin to that oxygen one. That's when I mentioned it.
Yeah, so I think I got all 4 and 7. So the table saws, the horsepower trap, pulling out the string. Oh, and then the last one in 7 is pulling out the goddamn teeth.
Oh my God. It was awful.
He had to pull out his teeth, and he had to keep finding like the little sheets that told him which one to pull out next. And you hear the crushing with the anything, that movie, The Dentist, I can't watch it.
Yeah. Anything with the face or mouth or eyeballs. There's a lot of that in these movies because it's so scary to most people.
And then I'll go through the last 2 a little quicker here. In Saw 8 is the laser trap. And I thought that one was really clever.
So is this Jigsaw?
This is Jigsaw.
Got it.
Yeah. So the laser trap in Saw 8 or Jigsaw, it's kind of cool, but also, again, terrifying because it's this person's like inside this little contraption. Mm-hmm. They start to get more sophisticated in these later ones. They're starting to use technology and shit like lasers, which could literally like split the person's face open. And it's really fucking terrifying because they can see the laser, and they know that if they move their face in a certain way, and the laser starts to close in on them, and they have this metal collar around their neck. So that one terrified me. And then the last one was Saw 9 was the tongue trap.
Yeah. I almost put that one on my list.
God.
I almost put that. Again, an opening of the movie trap. Again, I'll just say, like, the opening ones are always... Yeah, it was
the subway trap, right?
Yeah, the opening ones are always really amazing. And it turns out this guy's a cop, and so...
Yeah, so awful. The subway trap is this very last one I'll talk about. There's a contraption hanging from the ceiling by chains, and it's attached to the victim's tongue by a screw. If he moves off this wooden step stool, he's asked to drop off of the little chair and have his tongue ripped from its root in order to get off the train tracks and survive. Or just stay and die by train. You're either going to allow the thing to pull out your tongue. Oh my God. It's so gruesome. It's so gruesome. But yeah, you're right. As they got later into the series, it became more of like that Eli Roth just for disgust effect and less about the story. But nonetheless, by the time I was done, I'm like, I'm good with these for a little while.
I remember you finished before me and you're like, yeah, I'm good.
I'm good.
I'm good. But
Yeah.
you know what? It's pretty cool. Now we've seen the whole franchise.
Oh, yeah.
Like you can speak intelligently about the whole franchise now, or not so intelligently, depending on how
and
we
there
are.
are some stories that loop through the franchise that I remained interested in throughout.
Yes, and the inspiration for this came because I went to Midsummer Scream this year, and they had a Saw installation, and they had a panel because Saw X is coming out, and this episode is airing when it's coming out. So I hope you guys all go see it. We plan to go see it. And yeah, we should see. It was really fun at Midsummer Scream. They had an installation. There was a trap that you could sit in and they took your picture in it. And then there were some of the traps from the movies that you could take a look at.
That's cool.
Did you have... do you feel like there's favorites for you in this franchise? Like, I have kind of a ranking. So
Go for it.
my top 3 are the first 3. Basically.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Saw and Saw 2 are pretty evenly ranked for me. Now, I imagine back in the day, Saw, the original, would have ranked a little bit higher, but I really like both those 2 movies, and I think they go together really well. And then I also like Saw 3. And then, like, the next tier for me would be like Jigsaw and Spiral. The more recent ones kind of come in as like decent movies. I would throw them on. If somebody wanted to watch them, I wouldn't mind them being on. Like, I think they're solid movies. And then the lower tier is like 4, 6. They're like solid, but I wouldn't really like try to watch them, like 2-star type of deal. And then Saw 5 is probably the worst of the OG for me. And then 3D is for me the worst movie. So that's how I kind of rank.
Mine's pretty similar. I mean, 1 to 3 is a no-brainer, and then I would also say 8 and 9 I like next. It really dropped for me in 5, 6, and 7. So I would go 4 after 8 and 9. So I'd go 1,
that's
2,
what I
3.
did.
Yeah, same. So yeah, and then 5, 6, and 7 being the last. I just think, once you get to Hoffman in 5 and 6, I'm like, I don't care about you.
Yeah, I liked 6 a little bit more than 5, but yep.
I like when Carrie always comes back.
Yeah, my problem with that is that they could have done so much with that.
And they actually had planned on him coming back much sooner.
It's such an amazing get
Oh,
to
my
have
God.
Carrie
It's
always
incredible.
is the main character of the first one, and like having him come back, if they had a good script, that would have been so epic.
And there's some reviews that talk about that and how they had also said that they had planned on the intention, I think, was to bring him back much sooner into the franchise. It was a wasted opportunity.
It's just so damn disappointing.
I know. You want some answers?
Yes. Where's my notes?
Where's my questions? Oh, here we are. Okay. Number 1.
Yes, ma'am.
How long did it take to film the first Saw?
Well, I know it was I read about this. It was a Sundance movie, like early aughts, I guess, like 04 or something like that. And I think it's like, I mean, I'm not going to get the days right, but like 20 days or something.
18.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
close.
I had read that story.
Number 2, true or false? The first Saw was written with the first 3 movies in mind.
Sure, yes.
False. For James Wan and Lee Wanell, a franchise was never on their radar.
Yeah, and you can really tell that, because I could have gone either way with that answer, is when I watched Saw, the original, it's a complete movie. It's a complete story. You don't have to watch any of the other movies, in my opinion. The first movie is excellent.
You can watch 2 and see how that was starting to transform, but 1 is a standalone movie.
It's a standalone movie. You really don't have to go any farther if you don't like them, or that you just wanted to see like what the hubbub is all about. And then 2 and 3 are solid. But
number 3, how many syringes were used in the needle trap?
5,000.
120,000.
Jesus Christ.
And then what types of tips replaced the needle points?
I don't know.
Just fiber tips. They just use like a fake. It looked like a...
like a fake, like it's something that bends.
Yep.
Okay, gotcha.
Although they must have had a few in there that stuck in, or at least stuck to her.
They figured out how to do it. They taped him there. Or something. Yeah.
Number 4, what was written on the wall at the crime scene near Detective Allison Carey's body. So was it Her Life is in Your Hands, Cherish Your Life, or Judge as I Judge?
I think it's the first one.
It's Cherish Your Life, B.
B. Cherish your life.
Cherish the life. Number 5. During the release of Saw 4, Lionsgate partnered with this organization to offer free movie tickets to fans who donated what?
Blood.
Yes, the American Red Cross.
Blood. It's in your blood.
It's in your blood.
Blood. Thank you so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed this entirely gruesome reboot of all of the drops that scare the shit out of us.
It's overwhelming.
I know.
I'm overwhelmed.
Help! If you have a favorite trap, meaning the trap that scared the crap out of you, please share it with us.
If you've built your own,
yeah,
and you want to share it.
No. Don't do that. Share with us what it is. We would be happy to hear. If this has been a episode of Terror Talk, and my name is Shannon.
And I'm Cathy. Sleep safe, everyone.